Friday, right? And we have a little special segment that started last week. So I'm going to hand the mic over to my friend Kyle, also known as Macaroni. Holy Macaroni. How are you, Kyle? Please give me that bowl of macaroni. I am hungry, sir.
Well, thanks for having me up again. I much appreciate it. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Bowl of Macaroni. I hope you're hungry just like Hero is. So the first thing I want to talk about two different things, just like I did last week. The first thing is last week I talked about two-factor authentication and ways of doing that, such as a software application, Google Authenticator, or a physical security device called YubiKey. The one thing I want to mention is another way that people go about two-factor authentication, and one might be an SMS notification where you get a text message with a one-time passcode after you use your password to log in. That's arguably a very insecure way of doing it versus using a security key or an authenticator application. So first of all, I don't recommend doing it. But if you are doing that for certain applications, what I would recommend you doing, I didn't mention this last week, is going into your mobile device and enable SIM locking. You can do this on Android, on iOS, and I even believe Pixel. I don't have a Pixel, but I'd presume they have that option for SIM locking. What SIM locking will do, if you're receiving SMSs for two-factor authentication and you're getting your one-time passcodes that way, what it'll do is prevent bad actors from doing an attack, an attack vector they like to use for socially engineering your service provider. So if you're using AT&T or T-Mobile or Verizon or whoever, what they will try to do, they'll get a SIM card, they'll try to socially engineer your provider to enable that SIM card. So then what they'll do is start being able to receive your text messages and stuff, right? So if they have your password and they socially engineer your provider, then they can also get your two-factor authentication code. So I would recommend doing that. Someone else mentioned to me that they also put a note on their account at their provider to only allow anything like that kind of behavior if you're physically in store, as in person in store, but at least enable SIM locking. So the new topic I want to talk about today is password management. So we're all very familiar with the LastPass situation. If you aren't, I'm glad to talk to you on the side and give you more knowledge about that if you are using LastPass and you need a way and you want to know the most secure way of getting off of LastPass into another option. I can talk to you on the side about that. But I wanted to talk about KeePassXC and Bitwarden. With LastPass being cloud hosted, that was arguably so anything cloud hosted, you're really relying on someone else managing your stuff, if you will, right? So you're relying on them to be secure and following security practices, etc. So with Bitwarden and KeePassXC, you can actually locally host them. Bitwarden, by default, it would be cloud-based, but there is a technical way to use it locally managed, and there's a bunch of YouTube videos on that. I'm likely going to, in the next few weeks, going to do a YouTube video on both of these different choices. But KeePassXC is naturally local as well. You could do both locally. Bitwarden, it does require a little bit more work, but they're both great options, right? They both provide cross-platform support to certain degrees. I'm not going to get into all of the details. I don't have enough time to do that. But they also both provide browser integration for autofilling correctly, so in helping you ensure you're not autofilling on a website that is malicious and not the website you intended to be on. They can both support storing your SSH keys as well, not just your passwords, right? But SSH keys. There's a key store in KeePass, and there are also custom fields in Bitwarden that you can set these into as well. Bitwarden does have a free and a paid version. KeePass is just free by default, but they are also both open source, right? They both fall under different licenses. I think if I'm remembering my notes correctly, Bitwarden falls under AGPL and KeePass falls under GPL. I won't get into the details of those, but if you're familiar with licenses, again, just to recap, these are two options to locally manage your passwords, right? And you are now physically in control of that database that's storing your passwords versus using a cloud option. I don't recommend using the Bitwarden cloud option as your primary choice. But if you do, security is really for an individual choice, and the security versus availability is an individual decision. Again, they both have local options. I think they are great choices, and you should look into them more. And that is your bowl of macaroni.
Wow, that's a big bowl.